Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this far most insightful gathering. I'm so sure that we are going to share some remarkable insights which we'll carry while going back to your country. Just to begin with, let me introduce to my panelists first. My name is Amol Dete. I'm from Mumbai. I live in Mumbai, India. I'm a finance journalist and happy to be here. Working with the largest media brand called Economic Times and heading etbfsi.com and covering banking and finance space since long time. So we have really a remarkable panel. In fact, it's a stellar panel because we have the people from Africa, America, Asia, and going to discuss a lot about the financial inclusion, the financial education. So let me introduce you to my panelists first. My first panelist here is Adesola, CEO, FirstBank. Mr. Sola, glad to have you.
Yeah, thank you.
My next panel is Bajomo, President, FinTechNGR. Ade, glad to have you.
Thank you.
My next panelist is Jason Paw, Senior Director and Group. Jason, glad to have you.
Thank you.
My another panelist is Lawrence Law, Head of Group Business Banking, United Overseas Bank. Lawrence, glad to have you. You must have seen the robots outside in the exhibition outside EOB Bank.
Thank you.
And the charming lady sitting on the left is Nicole from the Milken Institute. She's the FinTech Director of the Center of Financial Market. Nicole, Valentine, glad to have you here.
Thank you.
So, ladies and gentlemen, the topic is very, very interesting. I don't need to stress on that. But before that, let me tell you something which I have observed, that the world has shifted or maybe divided into two parts now. The one important part is the geopolitical risks, inflation, the interest rates, and whether we'll come into the recession or not. Don't worry, we're not going to talk about that boring topic. We are going to talk about the second topic in my observation, which is very important, and that is innovation. Innovation is happening in each and every segment and specifically into BFSI. And here we are going to talk about what is the next level of innovation that can happen specifically into financial education and the financial literacy. If that happens, automatically this level which the BFSI companies have now will reach to a different level going forward. And Sola, let me come to you first because you're representing a FirstBank. So the question to you is directly to you, Sola, is that how do you design educational activities for your customers, because you have to scale them up, you have to literate them?
Thank you. For us at FirstBank, we've approached financial literacy and education from different dimensions. It's about empowering our customers. It's about educating them about the choices and options available. It's also about stratifying the education in such a way and manner that you are providing the right level of financial education to people at the right level that enables them to make the right choices. In designing the financial literacy program, you are trying to address mindset issues, knowledge gap, behaviors that has hindered people from accessing financial products. And we've been quite successful. What we've also found quite interesting, because we operate across the continent of Africa, about 7 locations, it's the demography and the level of the national literacy, general literacy, also influences their ability to absorb the financial literacy program. But overall, we've seen significant progress on the continent of Africa when it comes to financial education, financial literacy, and the take-up of financial services. So we've seen increasing or improving financial inclusion overall. Thank you.
Okay, noted your point, Sola. Let me go to Singapore and bring Lawrence here. What kind of activities, solutions that you are specifically forming, not just consumers, but also to the SMEs in terms of literating them and taking them to a next level?
So thank you. Before I really go deep into that, let me just quickly introduce to the global audience what UOB is. UOB is United Overseas Bank. They've been in the market for the last 85 years, present across the globe, 500 offices, and really for UOB, we are positioning ourselves as the one bank for ASEAN, right? Being able to connect everyone in ASEAN and be able to connect everyone outside of ASEAN into ASEAN as well. So for us, looking at the SME space, today we really look at it not just pure financial literacy, but also teaching them how to be able to digitize themselves. Given that COVID has really brought it very difficult for the SMEs, especially those operating brick and mortar, the ability for them to operate their business in the online space is critical. So being able to look at it from these two fronts is critical for us. The other thing is really to help us to look at the second generation of the SMEs. A lot of them are passing their reins back to their second generation. So teaching them the financial literacy, how to manage their business from their parents, and also not to stop there, bringing financial literacy and how small business operate to the high school of higher learning as well. So getting them, acquainted, as well as being able to be part of that SME community, helping them as to create, simple business solutions is also something that we are helping from the financial literacy perspective, from an SME perspective.
Okay. Nicole, you heard the bankers talking about the financial inclusion is, in my journalism capacity, I really want to ask you how truth is that, but I will tweak the question and try to understand from you because you are a think tank working with the policyholders and the bankers very diligently. So the question to you is, what are your observations in terms of the financial education or the literacy, because you are writing lots of research and you are working with the both?
Yes, at the Milken Institute, I had the FinTech program where we focus on market innovation and regulatory approaches, innovative regulatory approaches to FinTech. I would say that in the last year, 2021, over $210 billion has been invested in FinTech. It's a very hyper-growth sector, and it also has a lot of complexities in terms of understanding where the industry is going and everything that is being developed. And we take the approach of education and knowledge sharing very seriously. We convene policymakers, industry leaders, and thought leaders to talk about, have dialogue around how are we going to develop the industry in a responsible way. I will say that to your point around regulators and bankers, we like to make sure that education happens on a continuing level, because every day you wake up, there is a new FinTech innovation, digital assets, crypto. People are still trying to get their heads around what these innovations are in this new financial system that is being developed alongside a traditional financial system, that even in that traditional financial system, there's a group of people that are not have access to that information and understand how markets work. But I am optimistic that we're having conversations around digital currencies, we're having conversations around markets, and that understanding is translating to people, and it's making people then go deeper and say, if I am trying to understand a digital ledger technology, let me go back to understand how a bank works. Let me understand what a ledger is. And the industry that is of the future is causing a lot more people to come into the space and think about finance, think about their money, think about transactions, and how to mobilize themselves and empower themselves with that knowledge. And so at the think tank, we are creating lots of research, and we have information that we put out so that the end user, the consumer, the SME, the policymaker, and the industry thought leader can come together and talk about these issues in a collaborative way.
Quite interesting, Nicole. So we understood the view from the bankers, we understood the view from the think tank. Now let me understand a view from the fintech. But friends, let me tell you something. I have an iPad, and I'm going to take some questions from all of you also. So please shoot your questions as hard as possible, because I'm not going to answer them. The panelists are going to answer them. So please feel free to share your questions. So now let me move back to Nigeria and get Ade into the conversation. Ade, first tell me, how are fintechs making difference, specifically into the financial education and literacy, and how do you think that fintechs will make a big difference by working with the banks and the policyholders going ahead?
Thank you, Amol. I'm Bajomo. I am the president of FinTechNGR. That's the ecosystem facilitator with over 300 members. And we exist to connect, accelerate, and also advocate for fintechs for the obvious reasons which fintechs are with regulators, really. Now, it's a very, very vibrant environment, but I think if we take a step back and look at financial education and financial literacy, with financial education, we're talking about the economic education that actually focuses the SMEs on how best to use finance effectively. You know, it's another level higher than financial literacy, where at that point, really, you're just basically focusing on the basics and the understanding of it, really. And if you look at the market, we use the term MSMEs a lot. That's M standing for micro. And there are about 44 million MSMEs in that market. So that just tells you the scale and the breadth of the opportunity, that we have in there. Now, in terms of the fintech innovation, we've seen the fintechs move and indeed carry, in some cases, the banks with them. We've seen fintechs innovate around POS machines, because if you think of it really, you have the rural population and you have the urban population. The urban population tend to be a lot more financially educated than the rural population.
Absolutely.
And that's really where that innovation and how you deliver that innovation with technology matters. A bank, Adesola here has the highest number of branches in Nigeria. I think some 800 or so. But that doesn't solve the problem. But imagine the number of agents that we have. So when you add up all the agents are closer to the people right there that need the service. So the fintechs are using POS technology, delivering biometrics because fraud is an issue, but also in the process, delivering ease of use. When I say ease of use, you look at the type of transactions that the SMEs need to make and their customers need to make. They need to pay their bills, they need to receive payments, and all of those good things as well. So you see a very vibrant environment where there's a lot of innovation around technology and around security.
Okay, quite interesting. So I think the agent perspective is quite important, because even in India, we have something called banking correspondents, which most of the banks are using that model. In the hinterland where the banks cannot open their branches, the banking correspondent is actually one of the conveyor, to get these things done. Let me move my focus to China and specifically Hong Kong, and we have Jason here. So we have 10 by 1,000 product and initiative there. But let's talk about the digital divide and how can we actually bridge that gap, Jason?
Yeah, thank you so much. 10 times 1,000 Tech for Inclusion is a program of Ant Group. Ant Group's origins trace back 18 years now to our first transactions for Alipay. So 18 years old, we kind of think of ourselves growing up. And as we're growing up over the years, I think one thing is very clear. The topic of today, financial education literacy, we owe it to our consumers to design products that are clear. They understand what they're taking on. They understand how to leverage the opportunities that digital technology can bring. So I think that's the first thing that we all have to, that we all share here. I'm confident of that. But the biggest thing that we're looking at today is COVID-19 provided a silver lining, and that is the move towards digitalization. FinTech is moving faster than it would have beforehand. But in Asia alone, there's estimated to be a 50 million job shortage in FinTech or tech talents. So what do we do about that? So in 2018, we launched 10 times 1,000 Tech for Inclusion to train tech talents globally. And so as of today, actually, we have now 74 countries, learners on our platform, and about 800 certified learners this year. But the most important thing about this is, I think everyone in this room can probably agree, FinTech talent is not specific to one country or one place. FinTech is changing so fast that it really requires a global learning community. What is happening today in Singapore is probably going to happen somewhere else in a different format in another year. What happened in China 2 years ago may be resurfacing in Nigeria. There's a lot of lessons to learn from one another. That's what one of our learners said to me yesterday. We don't have to reinvent the wheel. There's a lot of cross-learning we can do, so we can design products that consumers want and need. And so we're looking forward to doing more in this space and doing with partners. We have over 40 globally. And so anyway, that's what we think about how do we start to solve the global fintech talent shortage.
Okay, quite meaningful, Jason. Let me move that story forward on the talent, and let me bring Sola back here. So, Sola, when we speak about the financial inclusion, and the financial education, we are talking about the basic things of maybe giving access to the large population of the banking or the insurance or something like that. But how financial education can actually eliminate the large issues like poverty, unemployment, and are you thinking in that direction? I understand that you have the large number of agents working with you in your region. How do you go ahead with that to eliminate all these large issues?
Thank you. The model that we have used, which is an agent bank model, today our bank in sub-Saharan Africa, we have close to 200,000 FirstBank agents across largely Nigeria for now, but plans to be spread all over the continent. What we found out, and this is what we say, you can actually do good by do banking. What we found out is that for every agent that we have created, we've invariably created 5 direct and indirect employment. So today we have about 193,000 agents in specific counts, and we created close to 1 million direct and indirect jobs. And what that has done, it's helping the continent to address poverty, helping the continent to pull people out of extreme hunger. And when you now layer technology to actually accelerate what we are doing, and I can see one of the questions that someone has asked regarding how do we accelerate and get the unbanked banked. What we found out is that technology enables you to employ more people, lower the cost to serve, and bring financial services to people's doorsteps. And for the first time in very recent times, specifically in Nigeria, but in a number of other sub-Saharan African countries, we are seeing good progress in terms of improving level of literacy, which invariably is addressing, helping people to come out of extreme hunger and helping to address the issue of employment. Our belief is that this approach is proven now with our technology, and as we continue with rolling out across the sub-Saharan African continent, it could potentially become a model that others in that kind of setup can copy and can leverage. But clearly, we've used this model to assist in addressing poverty and extreme hunger.
Okay. There is a interesting point when we speak specifically about the financial education. Being a finance journalist, a lot of times people even asked me, it's not just about buying a product, but how to make more money and can I invest in crypto? That's the question that I often received by lots of peoples. And I think it's not just about the typical financial products that you are talking about, but large segments like crypto or tokenization where the more literature is needed going forward. And let me get here, Nicole, once back and, talk on a little bit on these parts. So, Nicole, there are global, wealth disparities that are being exacerbated by the inflation and the current issues, right, like recession and geopolitical conflicts. How can fintech be a solution to the most vulnerable in times of crisis? How can fintech education provide social and economic mobility?
Well, technology in the hands of a great financial product can scale and empower and provide opportunities to enter into transactions that are cost effective, that are easy to settle, that can change the situation of a particular person or business. I would say that, for example, there are places where we can educate and provide more literacy in the market so that there is an opportunity to make those leaps and bounds. I'll give you an example. In America, 1/3 of Americans have a working knowledge and understanding of mortgage rates, interest rates, and financial risk. And so it's one thing you have to also, after you're putting access to capital in the hands of those who need it, there also has to be and should be an understanding of how to manage the risk of that capital, how to invest that capital, how to move forward with it. So I do believe that financial education and access to capital have to go hand in hand. Access to capital that comes from fair wages, that comes from investment into the communities that are not receiving those funds so they can grow their communities and expand them, and also manage the risk and make the investments so that these communities can grow. So that's really something that's very at the heart of our work in understanding ways to move the needle to eliminate these disparities that exist. The systems are not perfect. We are in very imperfect systems, and we all need to be committed to getting to that level of perfection. And what does that mean? It means putting that vulnerable, unbanked, underbanked, underestimated person or business at the center of your fintech products. Build for them. Build your product, build your service so that that consumer understands what you're providing and you're delivering on what you're providing. And so that's something that we can do to move the needle on the gaps that still exist, that still permeate our society with all of our understanding and innovation and technology and smarts. We're gonna have to figure out how to close these gaps, get people capital, and get them opportunities where they can make the decisions to grow their economies, grow their businesses and their communities.
Okay. Powerful comments, Nicole. Thanks for that. Lawrence, I have a very simple question, because whenever we talk about the financial products, what everyone hates is the complexity, right? And we don't understand half the things. In India, we have one simple thing. The bank agent will come to you and he will just ask you, sign here, sign here, sign here, and that's it. You never know what does he do with that. By looking at the robot that we have seen in your exhibition, on the SME perspective or a consumer perspective, can I go to a robot and ask him, hey, I need a loan? And he will give me the loan. He will disburse the loan. Can we see that simplicity of the financial education?
I think what we're trying to do is, being able to convert from financial literacy to financial inclusion. I think that's important. In ASEAN itself, there is 70 million MSME.
Yeah.
Big number there.
Yeah.
But I think what a lot of these SMEs do not even get access to funding at all. So today, what we are trying to do is we are working with some of the platforms that they're currently on, payment platforms, seller platforms, and before they even ask for a loan, we are able to use the data that they transact on it to be able to offer them a bridging loan itself. And rather than they come to us to talk to a robot, we are able to reach out to them proactively.
Great.
And I think what is also powerful about that is that we know how their business is doing. And if we find that they are struggling, we are able to give them, payment holidays, right? In the lights of the last couple of years you have seen in COVID, we have actually gone in to help businesses where they are struggling a little bit to give them some of the breather before they can come back, right? So that is the power of having that data when they are currently transacting online itself. So to be able to help them to get onto some of these platforms so that I can give them a working capital loan proactively, it's super important for me.
Oh, so you will have to also design a robot which will go to a SMEs or a customer who doesn't repay, right, to recover the money from the the person, right? So I have started receiving few questions from the friends sitting here and attending this session. This question is specifically for Jason. Jason, this question I would like you to take. You partly mentioned about your product, which is 10 by 1000, but China had seen a tremendous growth in the digital space in the last decades. Did financial literacy come with that? And what has Ant been doing for that? So generally the questions are taken at the end, but I thought, let me take participation from all of you, and I'm just taking in between. Jason, please go ahead.
Yeah, I think the tremendous growth in digital for China is really a result of a few big factors, right? You had infrastructure, mobile phones, and then you had groups of entrepreneurs, tech companies, and the ecosystem form. So as I mentioned, Ant Group has had now 18 years of history in terms of Alipay in China. And Alipay in China is more than a payment platform. It really is a combination of lifestyle, it is financial services, it's tech services, it's one of the largest donation platforms, it's a lot of things. And so did financial literacy help support this growth? I think it came hand in hand. Because if we think about the power of technology, it's enabled us to provide information in a transparent manner and across millions and millions of households. The way that we work is we are a partnership-focused model. We're an ecosystem builder, so we work with thousands of financial institutions across China to provide financial services. So yes, I like to think that Ant has played a part in it, in leveraging our platform to do good. And I think that's really incumbent for the big platform players is with the number of users that you have on your platform, how can you leverage that really to do good things? And so that's what we've done in China, and that's what we hope to do around the world as well.
Okay, sure. So there is one quick question. I would like you to take it, but I will also add to it. So the question someone asked is this, that on which specific topics are people financially illiterate and what areas are the focus in various markets? If you could give us your sense, and you could also add to it what degrees of financial literacy is required. We cannot say that everything can be done, maybe. So what degree of financial literacy is also required? Yeah.
Okay, so if we go back to thank you, Samuel.
Yes.
If we go back to the definition which I made earlier on around the difference between financial literacy and financial education, then the segmentation of the market between those who actually have significant or better knowledge of financial products. You would then effectively have to target this to the right market. So I will bring in, I know we've been talking SMEs largely, I will bring in the M part again. I'll bring in the individuals because in Africa, there are many single run or mom and pop shop as well in there. So when you take that, the products and the specific topics of illiteracy are actually very different or can be different. There's some overlaps. So in the overlap, so the fundamental overlap is when you're talking financial literacy, there are the 5 pillars. You want to earn money, you want to spend money, you want to invest the money, you want to save, and of course, borrow or take credit. Yeah. So if you take each of those 5 pillars, on earning money, that's pretty straightforward. Nigeria has huge, and I'm sure, around the world, the payments, fintechs have basically transformed payments and payments infrastructure. They've made it so simple to take money whichever way, or even where there are controls, fintechs find a way around, how to take that money out. Jason and I were having a very interesting conversation that even if you have to hop through PayPal to get to the end, or flip it through crypto, fintechs make that happen. So that part of it, I think, is well resolved. But I'll break it down. Where you have rural communities that don't have, we assume, this population assumes everybody carries a smartphone.
Yes.
Well, but no, probably about, if you take Nigeria, smartphone population is only about 30 million.
Okay.
But mobile phone penetration is 170 million.
Oh, God.
So that means you've just excluded a lot of people if all your solutions are based around smartphones. Yeah, and banks, I used to run technology and ops in the largest retail bank, like I said earlier on. And 5 years ago, we innovated around credits. Yeah, where we can take data, we can see where inflows come in, and we can actually assess a customer and disburse the credit in 10 seconds. And I mean in 10 seconds, and I've tried it all over the world, across 6 channels. Yeah, we use the USSD channel, that's the Universal Supplementary Service Data Platform, which is low cost, accessible. You don't need any bandwidth, literally. True. In there. And it was free at that time. And we actually used that to penetrate and delivered services there. If you then take that to the spend, that's really when it gets a little bit trickier. Yeah, what are you gonna spend? Are you gonna spend using cards? And that's where financial education comes in, because cards can be very tricky. Yeah, you know, if you have to train people not to lose their cards, not to divulge their PIN to the agent, yeah, who's trying to pretend he's helping, but basically has basically taken the PIN or indeed copied the cards and all of those kind of stuff. So in each of those pillars, solutions have to be designed specifically.
Right.
Yeah, but more importantly for SMEs, what COVID brought in was actually digital literacy, because businesses have to move from offline to online.
Yes.
They have to transform. So a lot of effort and energy has been spent by many banks, and many fintechs have innovated, you know, Flutterwave, Paystack. If you follow the Nigerian market, you see a lot of innovation around moving these merchants, yeah, who basically used to sell in stores, having an online presence, and social media as well. You know, they can now sell on WhatsApp, sell on Instagram, and all of those kind of stuff. So that literacy is being facilitated across the ecosystem.
Right.
The other point to make is that it's also offline. Yep, if you're offering a service, you must have a strong offline service as well. Because when the online world fails, yeah, in the rural areas, some people still want to physically go to a bank branch and complain.
Yes.
Yeah, so both have to work in an omni-channel manner and in a transparent manner as well.
Yeah, but perhaps the bankers don't want the complaints or customer to come to the branch and complain. Maybe that's why. But on the smartphone, point, sometimes I believe, as they commonly say, the story of the West is written from the stable of the horse. I think the story of the banks and the financial institutions will be written by the UI and UX going ahead in the future, what kind of mobile app that you create. So Sola, before coming to your question, I have a small comment to make. When I got into the journalism, I started covering insurance as a sector, which was very complex, very difficult to understand. And I asked a CEO, I says, why the products are so complex? So the CEO said, because the products are so complex, we can missell and make money. So the question is, how to make a greater transparency when it comes to the products offered by the BFSI companies, and how to ensure that there is enough transparency, because we are talking about the financial education, which can take care of the first part, where we are telling them why it is important to buy the product. But in the second part, he should also know in detail what is there in the product, and how should policymakers and banks look into this aspect.
So thank you. For me, there are roles that both the policymakers and regulators and the operators themselves have to play. In this wise, I believe the regulators have to lead. They have to lead the way in terms of coming out with what I call consumer protection kind of policy that basically empowers the banking community to know their rights, establish a route by which dispute will be resolved, such that when there are disputes, rather than going on social media to make noise, people can logically apply and their cases will be looked into. So those are two critical roles that the regulators have to play. Put a framework in place that allows for dispute resolution, ensure that there's, they are not only seen to be fair to the banking community, people also believe that they are fair. On the part of the operators, I think there is something that goes with being known to be ethical. So when you pride yourself as a franchise or as a brand that does not missell, a franchise that puts customers at the heart of your business. So our own war cry at FirstBank is you first, which means customer comes first in whatever we do. And part of our brand promise is that we will never missell products to you. And if there's a dispute, we ensure that we go through a transparent process to resolve those issues. I think that collaboration between the regulators and the operator is required to inspire confidence in the banking community, especially the guys that are currently financially excluded. They need to have comfort that when they indeed come into the financial world, not only will they be sold the right product, in case of dispute, they need to be assured that there will be fair hearing and that their complaint and cases will be dealt with fairly. I think, in my view, this is the minimum that we have to do to get more people who are currently outside of the financial cycle into the formal financial cycle. And if we do that, like I mentioned in my earlier comment, the country and the continent and the entire world will be better off for it because we'll be helping to address all these Millennium Development Goals, addressing hunger, extreme poverty, and promoting health. Thank you.
Okay, sure, Sola. So this question is for Lawrence specifically, and you partly mentioned that question, Lawrence, answered that question, but I would like you to add how. So the question is, given EOB's regional ambitions, does the bank have differentiated strategies and channels to educate SMEs across the various markets in Asia? This question is from the audience, Lawrence.
Sure. So I would say, first of all, that the SMEs are not homogeneous, right? They are coming from different backgrounds. Some of them are professionals turning into SMEs. Some of them, just started out taking over the reins from their parents. And others, just come straight out of school. So I think, first of all, we have to be able to dimension the younger SMEs, those that just started out, those that, have gone past the 3 years trying to, grow further. And also, again, the different types of industry are, again, also very different. So that financial literacy, that digitalization education got to be tailored across the various sub-segments I talk about. And as what some of the panelists also talk about, it's not just digital. So the good thing about UOB is that we have got both the digital aspect and also the branches that we have across the various countries that we're in. We constantly work with our branches and also the fintech partners to conduct sessions to teach them how to digitize themselves. And to the younger startups, what does it mean about cash flow? How do you manage cash flow as well? So that is something that we actually work very closely with our community, and every single branch is basically the leader of that community as well, right? So that we basically want to empower them to run that. At the same time, we just, in fact, just a couple of months back, we just launched the UOB SME app, bringing the bank to you, not just financial capabilities, but also the beyond banking capabilities as well. So, most of the SMEs, the sole prop is the CFO, he's the CEO, he's the head of sales, he's the head of ops and everything, right? He's doing everything. And to be able to see all of that in one app because he have digitized part of his operations is being able to help him manage his business better. Last but not least, we also, through the various personas at the different life stage, churn out good content that we have also on our app as well, so you can actually read on the go. And we are very happy to partner with anyone out there to be able to push out all these content to be able to educate the SMEs out there.
Okay, noted your points. I'm sure the audience has taken that note. So there is one question which I will ask you, Jason, and this is specifically about the Gen Z and millennials, which is my important and favorite topic, because even we started using FOMO, TTYL kind of slangs in our articles. I sometimes wonder whether the banks will have an account like TTYL or FOMO or something like that, rather than the saving and the fixed deposits going ahead. So the question to you, Jason, is, because that's where the generation is. So the question to you, Jason, is financial inclusion education. With the increase of Gen Z and millennials in MSMEs, what actions are financial institutions taking to improve the literacy level of the youths?
Yeah, thank you, and this is an excellent question. I'm going to address this one in combination with the other question about, I'd love to, on ESG as well. Sure. So we have 1,800 learners that we certified over the last 2 years through our program, again representing 74 countries. A number of them are quite young, 30% are female, a quarter of them are from MSMEs. And we run a capstone project every year, and the capstone project puts together our teams, virtual teams, from all over the world. This year, at least half of those capstone projects were about youth and financial literacy. It was actually quite interesting that that was the topic. And the reason I think that is because the youth today, number one, they understand technology better than us, actually. They're users of technology, and they're actually looking after their own generation, the generations to come. And so what I think financial institutions or different organizations can do is one, we should empower more youth to have the capabilities, the support, the technology, the training, the mentorship to be the next product managers, right? We have one learner, a young woman from Pakistan. She's the only female in her group. She leads the digital part of this bank, and that's what she's doing. She's designing products for women, for young women, and on financial literacy. How do you manage your money better? But I think one thing's for certain, if we look at a few more years, we're gonna see AI create digital CFOs for everybody, right? We're really excited about that too from Ant Group. Of course, it's got to be done in the right way, but I think there's a combination with youth and technology that's going to have a lot of these solutions to these questions that we're asking. And the second thing, just real quick on ESG.
Yes.
Besides Europe, maybe the United States, Singapore.
Net zero, yes.
I don't think too many other people understand or are talking about green digital finance,
yes.
to be very honest with you.
Yep.
And so I think we have a lot of work to do globally in this area. Entrepreneurs that I meet from Africa, it's not on their mind yet. It really isn't. But it will be, because governments are going to mandate this because our climate needs it. So 10 times 1,000 next month, we're launching our first green finance, green fintech mini-series to start to get this content out. So I think that's another area a lot of us can work together on.
Right, sure. So last few minutes left, but let me ask some very, very important questions. And Nicole, I will start with you. We partly discussed about education, the need of education, the gaps which are there, how the collaboration can help and how the innovation can build a difference. But then the question to you now is, how do you believe, if you could give very specific answer to this, how do you believe the role of banks, regulators, and the policymakers in financial education and inclusion is right now, and how can they make a difference with different roles?
So I speak with industry leaders at all levels in financial institutions, fintech, and in the conversations that I have, I ask some questions. I ask the question of, what kind of data are you collecting on your impact?
Okay.
What kind of impact are you having in your consumer base or to your end user? I've had some answer that they don't collect a lot of data because they don't want to have high abandonment rates on their products and services. When platforms are built, they don't want to ask too many questions about what's the impact is on the consumer or end user. I will say that as a think tank, we are evidence-based and data-driven. We would like to know the real impact of fintechs in the space. And I believe also regulators are calling for, in the US in particular, will be calling for evidence of financial inclusion. They want to know, where are your financial inclusion numbers? Where are your impact numbers? Are you collecting this data and keeping track of your work? So for that, that's a place where we can utilize data and asking the right questions to get us there. And I just want to just add to one point that was made around youth and the future. The future is being predicted that there's going to be so much value creation through the transformation of financial services and fintech. Web3 is going to be over $10 trillion business in 2026. That is what the projection is. We're not going to get there unless our consumers, our end users, our young people are educated and ready to grab that opportunity. Okay. So for regulators, for banks, for innovators, we all need to have on our mindset that the future is what we need to be preparing for with our present day activities on education and empowerment.
So you answered my, the next question was also, if I would have time, I would have asked you. So Sola, let me ask you again a very important question. So we discussed all these aspects in terms of what need to be done, what is being happening. The question is, how do you actually measure the impact? Because you have hundreds of agents, you have been dealing with a lot of customers, SMEs, and guiding them in what can be done. But how do you know that you have made XYZ number of people literate and they are in the system actually getting benefit of what you taught them? How do you actually measure the impact?
We do measure impact. What I haven't seen is like an industry-wide kind of data that put a global perspective to it. But within our own institution, we actually do measure what we call it, developmental impact of every actions that we take. And the whole essence is to justify or show that beyond banking, we are indeed creating value. So I mentioned the example of, for every FirstBank money agent that we created roughly 5 direct and indirect jobs, for example. We discovered that for the most part, each family, when you empower one person, you are invariably empowering, because Africa has a very interesting support system.
Right.
So you are empowering X number of families. But what I haven't seen, and I think that was part of the point that Nicole made, is an aggregate number that allows policymakers to push the country, the economy in a specific direction. Clearly, there's a gap in there that I think is worth addressing, measuring the impact of decisions and actions of financial institutions and fintechs.
Okay. You want to add? Yes.
If I could just add to that, I mean, it wasn't by design, but Shola and I sit on the board of the Nigerian Payments and Settlements platform. And when you look at some of the impacts there, we've seen transaction volumes rise year on year by about 50%.
Right.
For 7 years in a row. Yeah, so, and if you look at it, the real big wave is not just coming from banks, it's coming from fintech players who are actually primarily agency banking operators. Yeah, so you have a player called OPay, and OPay actually is doing far more transactions in Nigeria than maybe bank number 6 on the pecking order, from nowhere.
Right.
Yeah, and then you switch it over and you go into telecoms. Nigeria, a few years back, issued the Payment Services Bank license.
Yes.
So we have 50 million people in the banking system because you can't get into the banking system. You have to have your KYC and all of those stuff. So those barriers were high, so to speak, really. The telcos have 170 million. So why not give them the ability and the distribution network? So the largest telco has 770,000 agents.
Right.
So just imagine that reach really in terms of impact. Then you add on the multiplier effect that Shola has mentioned for each agent. There are 5, add it all up there, then I think the impact just becomes very clear.
Right. Thanks for adding that. In fact, you kind of partly answered what I wanted to ask you, so I will save that question and go to Lawrence. So Lawrence, we are almost coming to a close, but I have a very important question. So when we speak about the financial education or the financial literacy, like we have a chapter which is SME and consumer, very important, and we discussed in detail. But what about the financial literacy and education of the financial institutions and the policy holders and the policy makers themselves? Are the people who are taking decisions at the banks and the financial institutions well literate? And what if they don't know that? Because if they are not well literate, if they do not know how CBDC will work, if they do not know whether to apply blockchain for the supply chain or the other transactions or not, the innovation will not take place. So how do you ensure at your bank or maybe at industry, if you want to answer, the reskilling and the education of the people working in the bank and the financial institutions?
So I think starting from your own team, right? Starting from my own team, I think it is important for them to know the new way of doing things, what the SMEs are looking for, and how simple we need to make products, for the end consumers. But I think thinking as a bank, we also have set up an entire program, right? We call it, so the fact is that, as a bank, we actually educate everyone at the most senior levels, the MDs, all the way down to the last man on the ground, to be able to learn the different aspects, as what you talk about, the trade financing, the blockchains that's coming through, and what all that means to us, right? So I think it is important for us to continue to do that, and it's also important for us to work with regulators to actually extend this further than just the banks, right? So the community, the agencies out there is also something that we need to actually engage as well, because without that, they are not able to create the right programs for us, for the SMEs to participate in as well.
Okay, I think just few seconds left, but I think this is a very important question. And Sola, I want you to answer that very quickly. What are some of financial management lessons that you were never taught but learned by experience? Yes. You look the more experienced on the dais here, that's why.
Yes. A couple of things, actually. I call them the things you are not taught in Harvard Business School. One, sometimes when you are taught in school about the importance of cash flow, you actually take it for granted. Cash flow is actually at the heart of every business. For me, if you follow the cash flow, whether you're in a trading business, in banking business, in fintech, once you follow the cash flow, then you follow the value. That, for me, is the most important financial training that I've given myself. Follow the cash flow, wherever it is.
Sure, quite meaningful. Thank you so much, Nicole, Lawrence, Jason, Sola, and Ade, for sharing remarkable insights here. I got a different perspective. I'm sure, friends, you also enjoyed the insights that the lady and the gentleman share here on the stage. I must say thank you so much for attending this session in large numbers. We thought that it's going to be the last day and perhaps people will not be there, but thank you so much for listening to us very patiently. And I'm sure you got some meaningful insights which we'll try to adopt with you and yourself. But I think the journey of financial education and literacy should continue far more aggressively, because it's not just going to be about just what is bank and what is insurance going forward, but as technology is evolving, we all have to learn what is quantum computing, what is CBDC, what is blockchain, and how the AI will work. I think all that. So thank you so much once again, and I hope you enjoyed the SFF, and stay tuned to the conversation. Thank you so much.